The Galactic Council had ruled the known galaxy for millennia. A vast coalition of advanced alien species, they saw themselves as the ultimate authority. Each planet that joined the Council fell under their protection. It wasn't entirely voluntary, though. Member species were required to pay tribute, resources, technology, labor, or soldiers, offered up to ensure the stability of the Council and to remind every race of their place in the galactic hierarchy. The Council portrayed themselves as benevolent overseers, but beneath that facade was an iron grip. Any species that resisted, or even hesitated to meet the Council's demands, was swiftly punished. Compliance meant survival, resistance meant destruction. Many planets had tried to rise up in defiance over the years. None had succeeded. Humanity, the newest species to enter the galactic stage, had been quietly observed for centuries. The Council had noted their rapid technological advancements, their ability to adapt, and their unpredictable nature. But to the Council, they were still primitive, newcomers in a galaxy full of species far older and far more sophisticated. Now that humanity had spread beyond its solar system, establishing colonies and making contact with other races, the Council decided it was time to assert dominance. An alien fleet appeared in Earth's orbit, a formal delegation dispatched from the Council. It was the same process every new member species went through. The demands were simple: tribute. Earth was to offer up a significant portion of its resources and technology. If they refused, the consequences would be devastating. The Council had no reason to believe humanity would be any different from the countless other civilizations that had fallen in line. On Earth, the arrival of the Council's delegation sparked a wave of anxiety. Humanity had always feared the day when a more advanced species might arrive with ill intent, and now that day had come. Governments around the world scrambled to make sense of the situation. Military leaders assessed the power of the alien fleet, recognizing immediately that Earth's current defenses were inadequate. Civilians watched in fear as news networks broadcast the alien demands. In the Council's eyes, this was just another routine procedure. The high-ranking alien ambassador sent to deliver the ultimatum stood in the Global Assembly Hall, flanked by his aides. His towering figure, all sharp angles and gleaming eyes, radiated an air of superiority. He didn't speak as he handed over the message, a formal document in the language of the Council, but the message was clear: submit, or suffer the consequences. Behind closed doors, humanity's leaders debated their next move. The global government, formed in the wake of humanity's first contact with alien life, had never faced a crisis of this magnitude. The demand was outrageous, but refusing could mean total annihilation. Some argued that compliance was the only option. They pointed to the sheer size and power of the Council's fleet in orbit and to the reports from other member species, worlds that had been subjugated long ago. But others saw things differently. Throughout history, humanity had always faced seemingly insurmountable odds, and yet they had endured. Every time an external force had tried to impose its will on humanity, they had fought back. The military heads in the room voiced their concerns, not about their inability to win a direct conflict, but about the long-term implications of submitting. If they gave in now, they would be forever at the mercy of the Council. There would be no autonomy, no future free from alien control. Tensions ran high as global leaders weighed their options. There was no easy answer. Giving in would ensure immediate survival but would condemn future generations to servitude. Defiance, on the other hand, might lead to the destruction of Earth itself. In the end, the choice came down to a single question: would humanity kneel, or would they stand up, no matter the cost? The decision wasn't made lightly. The world's leaders knew what was at stake. The discussions lasted for days, but when the final vote came, the answer was clear. Humanity would not submit. They would not hand over their resources, their technology, or their freedom. Defiance, while dangerous, was the only path that aligned with humanity's core values: independence, resilience, and the unwillingness to bow to external forces. A reply was drafted, not in the language of the Council, but in plain, simple terms that no alien species could misunderstand. It was just one word, but it carried the weight of Earth's entire history behind it. That word was no. When the Council's ambassador received the message, he was visibly stunned. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. In all his years of delivering ultimatums to newly inducted species, he had never encountered a direct refusal. There were always negotiations, sometimes resistance, but never outright defiance. For a moment, the ambassador didn't know how to respond. Was this a miscommunication? Had the humans misunderstood the gravity of the situation? He transmitted the message back to the Council's core world, unsure of what would come next. The Council itself, composed of representatives from dozens of species, was equally baffled. No species had ever dared to say no to them. It was a word that carried more than just defiance, it carried a threat, a challenge. In their arrogance, the Council had never considered the possibility that humans might simply refuse. For the first time, the Galactic Council found itself in an unfamiliar position. They were used to wielding absolute power, to being feared and respected throughout the galaxy. But now, a young, seemingly insignificant species had openly defied them. The implications were staggering. If humanity was allowed to get away with this, other member species might start questioning the Council's authority. Their entire system of control, built over millennia, could be at risk. The Council's first instinct was to crush humanity, to send a message that defiance would not be tolerated. But there was hesitation. What if the humans were different? What if they possessed a strength the Council had overlooked? They were, after all, known for their rapid adaptation and unpredictability. Despite the uncertainty, the Council knew they had no choice. They could not allow humanity's defiance to go unanswered. The decision was made: a fleet would be dispatched to Earth, not to negotiate, but to conquer. Humanity had made its choice. Now they would face the full might of the Galactic Council's wrath. The message of humanity's defiance spread quickly through the Galactic Council's inner chambers. The reactions were immediate and mixed. For many of the species represented within the Council, the idea that a backwater planet like Earth would refuse such a clear directive was laughable. They mocked the humans openly, their arrogance seeping through their words. To them, this was just another opportunity to crush a lesser race and remind the galaxy of who held power. After all, how could a species so young, so technologically inferior, possibly think they could stand up to the might of the Council? But not all shared this sentiment. There were a few, scattered among the Council members, who felt a strange unease. Humans had proven to be unpredictable in the past. They were quick learners, adapting rapidly to every new challenge they faced. They had clawed their way into space within a blink of time by galactic standards. This unpredictability led some to wonder if perhaps there was more to this act of defiance than met the eye. Still, these warnings were largely drowned out by the louder, more aggressive voices calling for an overwhelming show of force. The Council convened in full to debate the next move. Some representatives insisted that humanity must be utterly crushed. It wasn't just about resources or power, it was about maintaining the Council's image. If Earth's refusal went unanswered, other planets might start to believe that they, too, could resist. That was something the Council simply could not allow. There were those who suggested that maybe a less violent approach would be better, that provoking a species with humanity's potential might be dangerous in the long term. These voices were silenced quickly. The decision had already been made, driven by centuries of arrogance and power. Humanity would be made an example. Preparations for retaliation began almost immediately. The Council's military fleet was vast, encompassing the combined might of several of the galaxy's most advanced species. Fleets that had crushed rebellions before and brought entire planets to heel would now be directed toward Earth. The force being sent was not just for a battle, it was designed to ensure absolute domination. They would descend upon the humans with overwhelming firepower and demand submission. If the humans refused again, they would obliterate them. The message was clear. No one defied the Galactic Council. On Earth, the gravity of the situation was sinking in. The news of the Council's impending response had reached the global governments, and it sent waves of panic through every level of society. Leaders were scrambling to maintain order, but beneath the surface, there was fear. Humanity had made its stand, but now they had to face the consequences. The Council's power was well known. Reports from other planets painted a grim picture of what happened to those who resisted. Civilians were glued to their screens, waiting for updates, wondering if the decision to say no would be the end of them all. The governments around the world began coordinating, trying to devise a plan that could give them even the slightest chance of survival. Meetings between military strategists, scientists, and political leaders were held around the clock. Humanity's limitations were glaring. They knew they couldn't match the Council's fleet in a head-on fight. Their weapons were outdated by galactic standards, their defenses insufficient to withstand the onslaught that was surely coming. Yet there was still hope. Humanity had one advantage, something the Council seemed to overlook: their creativity and adaptability. In secret labs and underground bunkers, Earth's brightest minds had been working on experimental technologies. For years, there had been a quiet recognition that humanity might one day need to defend itself from more advanced civilizations. Now, that foresight was about to pay off. The scientists had been developing an advanced energy-based defense grid, a system capable of absorbing and redirecting massive amounts of energy. If they could get it operational in time, it might give them a chance to defend against the Council's overwhelming firepower. But even more critical was a new weapon, a powerful EMP-like device that had the potential to disable the advanced technology of the alien ships. The theory was simple: while humanity couldn't outgun the Council, they could render their technology useless, leveling the playing field. This weapon hadn't been tested in a real scenario, and there were risks, but it was their best shot. Time was running out, and the world's leaders were fully aware that they were facing an enemy far beyond anything they had encountered before. The question wasn't just whether humanity could fight, but whether they could fight smart enough to survive. As preparations continued, Earth's leaders addressed the public. The message was one of unity and resilience, urging humanity to stand together in the face of this unprecedented threat. There was fear, but there was also a sense of defiance. Humanity had always been a species that rose to challenges, and this would be no different. Around the world, people prepared for the worst, but in their hearts, they held on to the hope that somehow, humanity would find a way to survive. The tension on Earth was palpable as reports began filtering in. The Council's fleet was on the move. The alien ships, massive and bristling with weapons, were closing in on the solar system. It was only a matter of time before they arrived. In orbit around Earth, humanity's hastily assembled defense forces were ready, though they knew the odds were stacked against them. Ground-based defenses were brought online, and the new energy grid was activated. The EMP device was prepped, though no one knew for sure if it would work when the moment came. As the alien fleet approached the edge of the solar system, the sheer scale of the invasion force became clear. This wasn't just a warning, it was an armada, designed for one purpose: total domination. The Council's commanders were confident. They had done this countless times before, and Earth was just another planet to bring to heel. In their minds, the fight was already over. They would demand submission, and if humanity refused again, they would simply destroy them. But what the Council had failed to consider, what they always seemed to overlook, was that humanity had never been predictable. They had faced impossible odds before, and each time, they had found a way to survive. Now, as the alien fleet prepared to launch its assault, humanity was ready to fight back, not with brute force, but with ingenuity, strategy, and the determination that had carried them through every challenge they had faced in their history. The invasion was about to begin. The Galactic Council was ready to assert its dominance once more, but this time, they were facing something different. Something unpredictable. Something human. The Council's fleet moved into position, their warships cutting through the blackness of space like sharpened blades. Each vessel, brimming with alien weaponry and superior technology, carried with it an air of invincibility. The commanders aboard these ships were no different. They had waged wars across countless systems, subjugating species with minimal effort. To them, Earth was just another planet, and its defiance was little more than a temporary inconvenience. They had seen it before, a flash of rebellion followed by inevitable submission, and they were certain humanity would be no different. As the fleet approached Earth's orbit, The alien commanders communicated confidently among themselves. Their plan was simple. The moment they entered Earth's atmosphere, they would send one final demand for tribute. If the humans refused again, the bombardment would begin, and Earth's cities would be reduced to ashes. Either way, the planet would fall, and its people would be forced into servitude or annihilation. It was, in their eyes, a foregone conclusion. On Earth, however, there was a different atmosphere. The fear was real, but so was the determination. Across the globe, militaries had mobilized, preparing for what they believed would be their final stand. Citizens watched the skies with bated breath, unsure if they would live to see the next day. But amidst the uncertainty, there was a growing sense of unity. Nations that had once been divided now stood together, united by a single purpose: survival. Humanity had always been at its strongest when the odds were against it, and this moment was no exception. In underground bunkers and command centers, Earth's military leaders coordinated their final preparations. They knew that a direct confrontation with the alien fleet would be suicide. The Council's technology was far superior. But they also knew they had something the Council didn't expect. The EMP-like weapon, developed in secret and untested in real combat, was their only hope. It was a long shot, but if it worked, it could cripple the alien fleet long enough to give Earth a fighting chance. As the alien fleet crossed into the critical range, the decision was made. The pulse was activated, releasing an enormous wave of electromagnetic energy that rippled through space, hitting the Council's ships with full force. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then chaos erupted. Alien systems, once thought to be impervious, began to fail. Ships that had been poised for an easy victory were suddenly disabled, their engines stalling, weapons offline. The Council's communications were in disarray, and commanders found themselves cut off from one another, unable to issue orders or coordinate a response. What had been an organized, overwhelming force was now a scattered mess of malfunctioning ships, drifting aimlessly as their crews struggled to regain control. The alien commanders, who had been so confident in their superiority, were now faced with a situation they had never anticipated. They had expected humanity to fall without much of a fight, but instead they had been caught off guard by a weapon they didn't even know existed. Panic spread through the ranks as one ship after another reported critical system failures. The fleet, once a symbol of the Council's dominance, was now vulnerable, exposed, and unable to strike. But humanity didn't stop there. While the EMP had done its job, the next phase of Earth's defense plan kicked into gear. The Advanced Energy Defense Grid, which had been activated just moments before the fleet's arrival, now enveloped the planet in a protective shield. The few Council ships that still had functional weapons began to fire, but their attacks were met with little success. The energy grid absorbed the incoming bombardment, redirecting and dissipating the destructive force across its surface. Earth remained untouched. The alien soldiers, who had been preparing to land on Earth and crush its resistance, were left in a state of confusion. Their plans had hinged on the fleet's ability to dominate the battlefield, but now, they found themselves staring at a planet that seemed impossible to penetrate. The Council had never faced an enemy like this before, and it was becoming clear that humanity's defiance was more than just a reckless gamble. It was a calculated move, and one that had thrown the entire fleet into disarray. On the ground, humanity's leaders watched the alien chaos unfold with a mixture of relief and disbelief. The EMP had worked. The energy grid was holding. But they knew this was only the beginning. The Council would recover, and when they did, Earth would need to be ready for the next phase of the fight. That's when the real counterattack began. Using the confusion within the alien ranks to their advantage, Earth's forces launched a series of guerrilla-style attacks. Smaller, agile ships slipped through the gaps in the alien fleet, targeting key vessels that were still operational. Rather than engaging in direct combat, they focused on hit-and-run tactics, exploiting the disorganized state of the Council's forces. Each strike was carefully calculated, further destabilizing the alien fleet and forcing them to spread their resources thin. The Council's commanders, still struggling to regain control of their systems, were caught in a web of confusion. Every attempt to regroup was met with another wave of unexpected attacks from the humans. Their ships were built for overwhelming power, not for dealing with a coordinated, tactical enemy who knew how to exploit weaknesses. For the first time in their long history of dominance, they found themselves on the defensive. The alien soldiers, who had once seen humanity as little more than an obstacle to be cleared, now faced the reality that they were dealing with a species far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Humans, it seemed, were not content to simply survive, they were fighting to win. And they were doing it with a level of ingenuity and determination that the Council had severely underestimated. As the battle raged on, Earth's forces continued to push the alien fleet back. The Council's ships, crippled and scattered, were forced to retreat from Earth's orbit, regrouping at the edge of the solar system. What had been intended as a swift and decisive victory had turned into a disaster for the Council. Humanity had not only survived the initial assault but had gained the upper hand. The Galactic Council could hardly believe the reports coming in from the battlefield. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had held off one of the Council's most formidable fleets, a force that had previously crushed entire civilizations without much effort. The initial shock was quickly followed by disbelief, especially from those who had mocked humanity from the start. It had been inconceivable to them that a species so new to the galactic scene could pose any real threat. Yet, here was the evidence staring them in the face. Humanity had not only survived, but they had fought back with a level of ingenuity and resilience that no one had expected. The Council's inner circle met in emergency sessions to assess the situation. There were heated debates, accusations, and finger-pointing among the alien leadership. Some had always viewed humanity as a wild card, capable of surprising feats. These voices were few, but now their concerns were impossible to ignore. The prevailing arrogance that had once permeated every discussion about Earth had been shattered. It was clear that humanity had been underestimated in more ways than one, not just in terms of technology but in their strategic abilities and their sheer will to survive. The Council's decision-makers, who had been so certain of an easy victory, now faced an uncomfortable reality. They couldn't afford to let this failure undermine their authority. Earth's defiance had already sent ripples throughout the galaxy. Other species, some of whom had long harbored resentment toward the Council, were watching closely. If humanity could stand up to the Council and live to tell the tale, what was stopping others from doing the same? Faced with the threat of widespread rebellion, the Council chose to escalate the conflict. There would be no more underestimation. Massive reinforcements were called from across the galaxy. This time, they would overwhelm Earth with a force so large, so devastating, that humanity wouldn't have a chance to recover. The Council's message was clear: no species, no matter how clever or defiant, could be allowed to challenge their supremacy. While the Council prepared for a full-scale invasion, humanity didn't rest on its initial victory. The fight was far from over, and they knew the next wave of the Council's forces would be even more dangerous. On Earth, scientists, engineers, and military strategists worked around the clock to improve their defenses. The captured alien ships provided a wealth of technological insights, and teams of experts were already reverse engineering the advanced systems they had salvaged. The energy defense grid, which had been a game-changer in the first battle, was upgraded with the help of this new technology. The EMP weapon that had crippled the alien fleet was also refined, made more powerful and with greater range. Every hour was spent preparing for the inevitable retaliation, but humanity wasn't just focused on defense. They knew that merely holding off the Council wouldn't be enough to secure long-term survival. They needed to expand the fight beyond Earth. Humanity's leadership reached out to other species across the galaxy, specifically to those who had suffered under the Council's oppressive rule for generations. There had always been whispers of rebellion in the outer systems, pockets of resistance that had been ruthlessly crushed whenever they appeared. Now, however, Earth's defiance had become a beacon of hope. Messages were sent to these underground factions, offering them a chance to join the fight. The message was simple: together, they could bring down the Council's regime. The response was immediate. Species that had once been too afraid to act saw an opportunity in Earth's victory. Uprisings began to break out on multiple planets, fueled by the idea that the Council's power was not as absolute as it had once seemed. Earth had shown that the Council could be challenged, and now others were willing to take the risk. What had started as a single act of defiance on a small, relatively insignificant planet was now sparking a galaxy-wide movement. Earth became a symbol of resistance, a rallying point for those who had lived under the Council's thumb for too long. As news of the rebellion spread, the Council's control began to weaken. Their resources were stretched thin, as they now had to deal with uprisings in multiple systems while still preparing for their next assault on Earth. The balance of power in the galaxy was beginning to shift, and for the first time in millennia, the Council's dominance was in jeopardy. Back on Earth, preparations for the next battle continued at a frantic pace. Humanity's leaders knew that while the rebellions were a significant blow to the Council, the war was far from over. The Council was still immensely powerful, and their reinforcements were already on their way. But this time, Earth wouldn't just be defending itself, it was now part of a larger, galaxy-wide conflict. They had allies, even if those allies were scattered and inexperienced in open warfare. The fight for survival had become a fight for freedom, not just for Earth but for countless other species across the galaxy. As the second wave of the Council's forces began their approach, Earth was more prepared than ever. The upgraded defenses were in place, and the new weapons systems were online. Humanity had learned from the first battle, and they were ready to take the fight to the Council once again. The Council, meanwhile, was determined to make Earth an example, but their confidence had been shaken. They no longer saw humanity as an easy target, and that uncertainty lingered in the minds of their commanders. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Earth stood as a symbol of resistance, not just for itself but for an entire galaxy yearning to be free from the Council's rule. The Council, desperate to maintain its grip on power, was throwing everything it had into this battle. The outcome would determine the fate of not just Earth, but of countless worlds. It was no longer a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future. The final battle unfolded with an intensity that shook the very fabric of the galaxy. The Galactic Council's reinforcements, a fleet far larger and more advanced than the first, descended upon Earth with the singular goal of crushing the planet once and for all. Their ships blotted out the stars, a reminder of the Council's relentless power, and the sheer scale of the invasion seemed overwhelming. But humanity had prepared for this moment. They had known the Council would bring everything they had, and they had planned accordingly. Earth's defenses, bolstered by reverse-engineered alien technology and the innovations of their brightest minds, were stronger than ever before. The energy defense grid that had once saved the planet had been upgraded to handle the increased firepower of the new invasion force. The EMP-like weapon, now refined and far more potent, was ready to disable key systems across the enemy fleet. But most importantly, humanity had developed something new, advanced stealth technology that the Council had never encountered, technology that would turn the tide of battle in a way no one could have predicted. As the Council's fleet engaged, it became immediately clear that this would not be a repeat of their first attempt. Earth's forces held their ground, using a combination of advanced tactics and guerrilla warfare to keep the enemy off balance. Alien commanders, confident in their overwhelming numbers, quickly found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Human ships darted in and out of combat zones, targeting key vessels with surgical precision, all while remaining hidden from enemy sensors. The Council had never faced such an unpredictable foe, and their fleet began to falter under the strain. But it wasn't enough to simply defend Earth. Humanity knew that as long as the Council's leadership remained intact, the threat would never truly end. The most daring plan of the entire war was now set into motion. A small, elite squadron of human ships, equipped with the new stealth technology, broke away from the main battle and headed directly for the Council's command ships. These vessels housed the Council's highest-ranking officials, the ones responsible for orchestrating the invasion and maintaining control over the entire fleet. If they could be taken out, the Council's forces would be thrown into disarray. The strike was swift and devastating. The human ships infiltrated the heart of the enemy fleet without being detected, their cloaking systems rendering them invisible to the Council's sensors. Once in position, They unleashed a coordinated barrage that crippled the command ships in one decisive blow. The Council's leadership, caught completely off guard, was thrown into chaos. With their command structure shattered, the alien fleet quickly began to fall apart. Orders went unissued, strategies fell to pieces, and panic spread through the ranks. What had once been an organized, overwhelming invasion force now descended into confusion. Several species within the Council's military, long disillusioned with their leaders but too fearful to act, saw this as their moment. Sensing weakness, they turned against the Council, refusing to fight any longer for a regime that had already begun to crumble. Mutinies broke out across the fleet, and soon, entire sections of the Council's forces were retreating or even joining the rebellion that had begun to take hold across the galaxy. On Earth, the news of the Council's retreat spread like wildfire. What had once seemed like an impossible battle had now become a stunning,